Hey guys, welcome back. A few things before we get started. Don't forget to get your tickets for the Starseed Adventures Conference in Sedona, Arizona, December 11th through the 16th. It's coming up. I think the main tickets are sold out, but they have the second tier, which I'm not sure the pricing on that, but those tickets are still available. So go to the website, starseedadventures.com, and check that out. And unfortunately, Aaron and I won't be there, but we highly recommend going and checking that out. And we are officially announcing our conference next May 22nd through the 25th, again in Grafton, Illinois. And Sherri will actually be one of the presenters there. And if you don't know who she is, you'll find out tonight because she has some incredible information, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the tickets will officially go on sale tomorrow for the conference, so stay tuned for that. One last announcement. We have a new promo code for the Hopewell Farm CBD. It's a 15% off sale that goes to the end of November. And that promo code is JTT Thanks. You get 15% off all their products to the end of November. That link is below also. So tonight we are joined by Sherri Divband, who is the founder of the Aramis Creative Learning Center, which you guys will find out about tonight. She works with children and much more than that. She does some incredible work. If you don't know, her YouTube channel is under her name, Sherri Divband, and you can go check out all of her work there. I will let Sherri introduce herself better than I can, but welcome to the show.
Wow. Well, thank you both for having me, Tyler and Aaron. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Tyler and I have been talking for over a year now, and so it's great to finally come on and talk with you guys. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. I caught your presentation at the Orlando conference, and it blew me away. What you cover, I mean, it's just, you can't encapsulate it all in one presentation. There's so much there, but you're doing some really important work, especially surrounding the children, because that is, to me, the most important thing right now, because, there's all this ancestral trauma that needs to be healed and things that we need to do as parents to prepare the way for the next generation. So do you want to explain a little bit about what you do as far as that goes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I created the Aramis Creative Learning Center at the end of 2019. It was something that I had been putting together for about a year or so before that. And even before then, my daughter Aramis, before I was pregnant with her, told me she was coming into my life, introduced herself, said she would be joining our family, and that she had an important mission and she needed my help. And at the time, I didn't quite know what that meant, but I was so excited about it that I said, absolutely. I had two boys at that point, so I was welcoming, having a girl into the family. And I knew it would be spiritual based because at that point in my life, I started really working more with people because I am an RVT by trade. So that's an animal nurse. I've been doing that for over 20 years. So most of my life, my professional life, I was working with animals. I didn't really interface with a lot of people, by design. There's a reason for that, which we can get into later. So I became very spiritual and because of my two boys, and I wanted to do something better in the world. I knew that there was more that I needed to do. And I started working with people and adults and helping them through Reiki. So I learned Reiki for animals first, and then I started working with people. And then I started seeing people's past lives. I started clearing traumas in their timelines, which is what I call past lives, which are really concurrent lives. And I really started helping people. And through that process, I started working with children. And I started realizing that there was so much more to these children than people have been recognizing over these past couple generations, and they're different. And so I thought, man, what I'm supposed to do with Aramis is create a spiritual center for children, because a lot of I teach a lot of classes. So I teach Reiki, spiritual development. I mean, you name it, I've taught it. And the parents would ask me, hey, do you teach this for children? Do you have anything like this for children? And I said, oh, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do with Aramis, because at this point she was still very young. And I said, oh, I'm going to open up a spiritual center for children so they can come and learn about Reiki and the energy body and past lives and teleportation and telekinesis and all these really cool things. And then, of course, how to manage your emotions and to remain balanced and learn about karma and all of these things that I feel is important and necessary throughout their growth. And that the word got out because I started speaking publicly about it around 2019, I went on Spiritually Raw. I don't know if anybody watching this is familiar with that podcast. And I went on and I spoke about it and I said, this is what I'm doing. And I got an overwhelming hundreds of emails and calls. When are you going to open one of these in my area? We really need something like this for my children. And then it turned into, the education system is not what, I really want for my child, and they're not thriving. How can we help them? Can you add curriculum-based courses as well? And it just blossomed into something so much bigger. So now we launched in 2020, in January of 2020, we launched an online platform. So we started teaching virtual classes, the examples I've given, many of which and many more, art, music, and Reiki and tapping and emotion coding and all sorts of things for children, crystals, how to use a pendulum, those sort of things. Then it blossomed into mindfulness, math, and spiritual science and ETs. And like we've gotten really into some incredible subjects, astrology. So 2 years in, we have 3 time zones and about 30 mentors. And we are an online only platform, but we are working to open the very first center here in Florida, which is why I moved here this summer. So we can open the first of many physical schools for children to go to. That is an alternative education platform.
Yeah. And I can't wait, because once the first location opens up, I know it's going to catch on, and I know that's the future eventually. And I like how you call the Creative Learning Center instead of a school, because obviously we know the school system and the prison system, it's all the same, one and the same. So I love what you're doing there. And I'd love to get into some of the information that you've received. So I know you work with these children, and you also work with their higher selves, and information comes through, and some of that information is mind-blowing. And I was wondering if you wanted to share any of that came through.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So aside from the learning aspect, I started doing a lot of one-on-ones with children, and many of which were autistic and nonverbal. So really, the experience or exposure that I had to a lot of these children was they weren't speaking to me. So I had to connect to them energetically. Sometimes they weren't even there. And I'd have a session with the mom or the grandparent that was really searching to help this child and say, okay, what does this child have to say to me? Is everything okay? Why aren't they speaking? Can you give me more information? And what started happening was these children were eager and willing to speak to somebody that could understand them. And I started to, one after another started coming to me, and I learned the most incredible information. So a lot of the information I know, I always tell people, like, Sherri's not a truther. I'm not a galactic informant. I'm not any of those things. And I don't even like to call myself I don't like the word psychic. I don't use that word. But what it is I think I'm an ambassador for children, and I'm able to communicate with them on a higher level so that they can bring forward truths. And so I have learned probably notebooks full of information that seem random and pretty random at the time. But when I pull it all together, I have quite a large library of information. And people ask me, how do you know these things? And I'm like, the children are telling me, they're coming in and they're looking for somebody that's going to explain why they are the way they are, why they act the way they act. Why are they different? Why are they unique? Why are they labeled? What are they here to do? What's their journey about? And I have been blown away almost every single day. Every child has something different to say to me. And then there are those that I speak, to personally. And one of which there was a young man that came to the conference in Orlando who was my client. And I actually spoke to him a couple of days ago, and he had said it was one of the best experiences that he had. And he went up on stage and was talking on one of the breaks to the audience. And he said he's a starseed and incredible child. And this boy has taught me a lot. And he tells me, we interface one-on-one, and he already knows. So a lot of children come in and they know, they remember everything, that the veil isn't there. The veil of forgetfulness is no longer there. It's not present. They come in with full of wisdom and knowledge. And so, the list is really long. So I don't know where you want me to start, but maybe give me one.
So I do. You mentioned, I know you've talked about the low energy grids that surround these schools that children have seen. And you said, I think you've gotten this from 30 different children that all have said the same thing from all over the world. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. Okay. Great question. And it's got to be at least 30. I've spoken with children in many countries, hundreds and hundreds of children from different backgrounds, both male, female, different ages. And the question came to me probably a year and a half ago, where a mother said that her son is screaming outside of the school and refuses to enter, will never settle down, because, a lot of parents are trained. Oh, they'll settle down. It's okay. And then you pick them up at the end of the day and they're like, oh, they seem fine. And then they come, and then it's this trauma that they're enduring every single day. But we're programmed to be like, that's okay. Your mommy goes to work and you cry yourself, and you cry until you feel comfortable. But this particular boy, would not relax the entire day. And so this mother reached out to me because she saw me in an interview. She said, Sherri, what's going on? Are they hurting him at school? What's going on with him? So I connected to his higher self, because he was too young. I think this boy was like 5. I think it was kindergarten, or maybe even preschool. And this boy was so eager to talk to me. He talked my ear off. And what he said to me was, listen, very matter of fact, because they don't come to me like a child. I want people to understand, when I speak with someone's higher self, oftentimes it's a very wise, adult-like being. Sometimes I feel like, I'm uncomfortable talking to them, because they seem like such a wise elder, and it's an honor to speak to them to begin with. So I don't think of them as a child. And what he said to me is, there is an energetic grid that is placed around all the schools that are in the system, which most are, where what it does is, it's an intricate grid that's whether it's through electromagnetic frequencies or some sort of technology, or a mix of both. And what it does is it disrupts the equilibrium of the child. So when they go into the school, it's almost like they become disconnected, and it's a negative energy. So it brings their vibration down. And what happens is it allows for them to be more in a hypnotic state, so that they can be programmed and listen to the teachers, and it suppresses them very much. And this particular boy said, I can feel it. And it physically, it was hurting him, and it made him feel uncomfortable. And he could hear ringing in his ears. And he said, I can't go in there. It's evil. And he even used the word evil. So I explained this to the mom. And at the time I was like, wow, like, how do I tell this mom that this is really like pretty bad? Right. And of course she wasn't surprised. She told me, she said to me, she said, I'm not really surprised. I had a feeling it was something like that, which surprised me. So that was the first time I was told that. And, children seem to come to me in clusters. I think the universe just guides people to the right person at the time, when the timing is right. And so I started getting a flood of children that were telling me the same thing. And these were children from the ages of 3 years old that were going to go into preschool, all the way to high school children that told me that they have been in that grid their whole childhood, experiencing it, and they didn't have anybody that understood, they didn't feel like anyone would understand them, so they never said anything. And so I had this large group of children all over the world. It's not just in America. It was in Canada, Australia, all over Europe. There was this one child in Hungary. So, I mean, it's everywhere. This was happening everywhere. It's not unique to the United States. So these children are feeling it when they go in the door. They know that the entire campus, there's a grid of energy that suppresses them, lowers their vibration. So they're more vulnerable to manipulation and programming, and it dims their light.
That's exactly, you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, it sounds like it dims their light. Like, yeah. It's almost like it sucks the life force out of you. Or what it means to be human. Obviously we can go into the whole schools being indoctrination camps, but which we already know.
So it goes beyond just what you're taught in schools. It's even on an energetic level like that. It's on these multiple levels that it's brainwashing the kids. It's programming them. It's draining them of their energy. And it's what we've known for so long. Like schools, public schools they're not schools, they're indoctrination camps, and they're machines that children get put in so they come out the other side a perfect slave for the system.
Right. Yeah, and they're designed as such, right? With the prison style campuses and the fluorescent lighting. I mean, the whole thing is designed to keep them indoctrinated in this situation of programming and brainwashing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and that was well said, Aaron.
Thank you.
There's so much to learn from the kids. Like, we would not really, so we can speculate. There's 5G towers next to all the schools, right up next to them, and there's actually people in town locally. I know one guy trying to trying to fight to have this one taken down that's right next to the school, and he's trying to prove that it's, you know, radiating these kids. But so people are trying to do something about it, but you don't really understand the true effects of it until you're doing what you're doing and communicating with these children. So like, what else, is there anything else in particular that stands out to you that has come through from them
in general?
Yeah.
You know, what they told me is, Sherri, we are targeted from the time we are in the womb, and sometimes even before. Because let me tell you, children that are light, you know, we're all light. And when we come in, we have a blueprint. We have our divine blueprint. And the dark side knows when the light comes in. You know, sometimes, I mean, I have been shown the children coming in looking like comets of light, which is why our Aramis Collective logo has the three comet stars coming in, because they can see them coming in, and they don't want that light to come into the planet, obviously, because it conflicts with their narrative. And so what happens is they become a target. And so the way that they target these children is through the womb. They start with the mother. So they want to, if they can infiltrate the mom, they can infiltrate the child in the womb. So they have moms, you know, doing all this unnecessary jabs and testing, you know, treatments, fertility treatments. I mean, you name it, invasive and non-invasive, some of which is are the prenatal vitamins that are not good for women. And these poor women are taking them and trusting their doctors, and it's actually poisoning their child. So there's a lot of ways that they can disrupt the energy flow and the life force that comes in through the womb. If they can disrupt the energy in the womb, they can disrupt the development of the child and also dim their light. You know, another big issue really in the United States, but all over the world, is the way that our children are birthed. You know, a child is supposed to come through the womb. That's how nature is intended. And over years of us going into this more of a patriarchal society, the norm has taken this divine feminine away. And you know, no longer can we put women on a pedestal for giving life. We put them down, and they make women birth their babies in shame. And I'm talking up to 150 years ago when this really started. And women really started to fear birth, because, you know, if you look back in history, there were no documents that showed that women were screaming in pain in childbirth. There was a loving environment. There was a family around them. They weren't secluded. They certainly weren't in a hospital. And that all changed about 150 years ago. And the whole trajectory changed. And then it was fear. So many women are fearful throughout their entire pregnancy. And those hormones of cortisol and adrenaline are running through the body, and catecholamines. And when they go into birth in trauma mode and fight or flight, then their baby is receiving all of that. And they have what's called a stalled birth, which really at the end of the day is the design of the dark system, because they don't want the baby to go through the womb, which is why first world countries, ironically, have the highest rate of C-sections, because then they can take the baby out and disrupt the birthing, the rite of passage through the womb. So you mean it starts all the way through that. Then we have the baby formula. You know, a lot of women are taught, oh, you don't need to breastfeed. It's not that important. And look what they're doing with the formula right now. I mean, you can see it in the news for the last year, what they're trying to do.
And I'm going to just jump in really quick. So yeah, you're right. The womb is also a portal. It's you know, it's the closest thing to source. And, you know, obviously, so right out of the gate, they're literally, you know, trying to cut that off. And then the baby, the water, they sell separate water for babies with added fluoride.
Yeah.
Right. Why do they have to add the fluoride in? It's literally advertised that way as something your child would need.
Absolutely. And I will be the first to admit that my first child that I had at 23 years old, 17, almost 18 years ago, I bought that fluoride water because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I literally bought that exact water. I didn't know any better. And most people don't. And that's the problem. You know, we're not educated properly. We are programmed to follow what we're told. You know, and then it goes into these things that they get, you know, 70 something of them that they get within the first few years, that contributes to lower. Everything is designed in the system to lower our vibration and disconnect the life force energy. And they'll do that through electromagnetic frequencies, through the food, the hormones in our food. I mean, look at how the children are developing now, of the girls, compared to previous generations. I mean, it's clear what they're doing, and that goes into sexualization and transgender. I mean, there's a whole other topic that we could talk about another time. But these children are telling us, they're showing us what they're doing, and it's our job to wake up from this. And we're trying to show you, we're trying to wake you up and break down these paradigms, and so we can teach you that this is not right. And so, what they're telling me, the children are telling me, is a lot of them are coming in volunteering to be the ones to show us the side effects of all of this, which is why we have such an uprising in behavioral issues with children, them refusing to go to school, them really, showcasing how they feel about this system. And they're outspoken about it from very young age, which is like a lot of the children that I work with. Their parents actually had to homeschool them in the last few years because they couldn't take they're literally, their child would not accept going to school. And it was causing such an enormous rift between the family and the spouses that they had to succumb, and the children are doing way better at home. So, there's so many things going on. The system here, the dark system, is designed for our children not to thrive. And it's clear in everything we do with technology, with the food that with the food that they eat, and the medical treatment that they receive.
Well, everything that happens the first 7 years of your life, I mean, that programs you. And if you're traumatized in those first 7 years in that young age, obviously that creates dissociation and all kinds of toxic behaviors as an adult, right? And then they just throw pills at you, and that's all part of it. So I really think it's important that we get into what a parent can do, and especially to guide their children. You don't want to be their master and tell them what they can and can't do. I feel like, I'm not a parent, but I feel I see some parents trying to make their kid like what they couldn't be or whatever it is. And I feel like we need to kind of just loosen up the reins a little bit, just let the kid evolve in the way that they want to and explore life in the way they want to explore life, and just kind of guide them through that process. Maybe you can go into, some of the ways that parents can shift and transition out of that schooling system.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, a lot of what I've been told is that the children are actually here to teach humanity and to teach their parents and to break their parents out of their programming. I've learned more from my children than I've learned from any teacher I've ever had in my life, and certainly any book that I've read. And then that's what they're doing here for us. And the issue is the parents are programmed, and I'm one of them. I used to be that way. And so, your child asks you why. You say, because I said so. Why? Because we've been doing this my mom did this, and my mom's mom, and so we have to think about that question, because they're like, well, why does it make it right? These children are asking difficult questions, and a lot of the parents, because of their own programming and lack of the ability to really listen with an open heart and an open mind, they have this hierarchy structure that we've been programmed into. I'm your mom and dad. You listen to me. Don't talk back.
Blind obedience.
Don't say no. Yeah. And if we just listen to them, you would be surprised the wisdom that comes through. A lot of parents tell me, Sherri, my child is saying the craziest things. How do I respond? They're telling me that they remember their past life, or, the school they'll actually say school is evil and the teachers are programming us. And they're like, how do I respond to that? And I say, listen, there isn't a right or wrong. There isn't an exact wording that you need to say. All they want you to do is listen. That's it. Just sit back and listen and learn. And then now you take that information and you reevaluate and think about it a little bit on your own time and say, gosh, I can't tell you how many times one of my children said something to me and I'm like, God darn it, they're right. Why do they have to do it that way? And when I really have allowed myself to think about it, I laugh, because I'm like, it makes no sense at all. There is no reason for it other than the programming that we've received for generations, because it's all about order. It's all about listen to your elders, listen to the teachers, listen to the adults, listen. And what that does is it dims the light of the child and it makes them feel like they don't have a voice. And why that's designed that way by the dark side, and that's in the system, is so that they grow up and they just listen to, and they do what they're told, and they're good little boys and good little girls, and they lose their sense of self. They lose their north, their true north.
Yeah.
So many adults are walking around in this world, they don't know who they are, and they don't like their job, and they hate their parents for it, and they come to me, and those are the adults that I'm working with. And I'm talking about 60, 70-year-old adults too, that have grandchildren, and they're looking at me like, where did I go wrong with my life? Can you help me find myself again? And it's no fault of their own. It's just, you can't even blame your parents. You can't even blame the grandparents. It's just this generational programming that we've endured. But one of the biggest mistakes parents make, and I say this over and over, is stop trying to tell your child what to do based on what you think is right, because that doesn't mean anything. So I'm not going to tell my child, you can't do something because I said so, because you should do it my way, because perhaps my way isn't the right way, and I've been doing it wrong all along, and they're here to show me a different way. So parents are like, oh, you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to do this, and you're going to make a lot of money. How many children, well, maybe you don't, but I hear it every day from these teens and young adults. I don't care about money. And I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do my own thing. I don't want to work for somebody else. They're coming in with a different energy. They're motivated to do something, and they're not motivated by money. They're motivated to do something different. These children are more service to others, as opposed to this egocentric service to self mentality that this matrix is designed upon. And it has been for quite some time, where it's a lot of ego. It's a lot of power driven energy. And these children don't want that. And they don't come in that way, but they're programmed, and they're traumatized, and they are not listened to, and they are undervalued, and they are not respected. And it leaves them. And then they go into the system, and they become really unhappy adults. And the system and the cycle continues when they have their own children, and they make their children do something that they don't want to do. And they judge them on behaviors that they wish they could change, but they don't know how. And it's this vicious cycle that we have to change.
And that's why it's so important to start young and allow them to be the starseed that they are. Allow them to be themselves. And they're not, every child, I think, learns differently. Like when you throw a kid into a classroom, I think Heidi Pop from Raising Starseeds, that's another great channel that covers children. She mentioned, like, we're all tuning forks. And the reason why children or anyone falls asleep in school when they're learning this information is because subconsciously that it's bullshit. You know that it's not like real history, whatever. Subconsciously it's not, you're not benefiting from that, so your body literally tunes it out and you fall asleep, and it's all energy again. But going back to as early as you can, allow them to be who they are and learn in ways they want to learn, and do things that might not seem normal because no one else is doing it. But guess what? Like there is no normal anymore.
That's the whole concept of unschooling, which is what I know Simon Esler and his partner do that with their kids, where he's like, so the school system basically stifles learning and creativity, and it's by design, because children, before they get that beat out of them by the school system, they want to learn. They love learning, they love exploring, creating and exploring, and but they love doing that naturally. And what the school system does is it beats into you all this
busy work,
useless information, and like stuff that doesn't interest anyone. and then kids end up hate learning because they hate school. They don't hate learning, they hate school, but it makes them stop that natural cycle, that natural process.
Right.
And it destroys it. And then they end up, and then what we just talked about. So unschooling is kind of like deprogramming from all that, and then getting back on track to like the natural, what they're naturally interested in, their natural gifts, and kind of working with that, like you just said.
And they're not learning anything of value, so they're not retaining any of that information. They leave for summer break, and they come back and they don't remember anything they learn, because they know innately it's not really that important to know. And my son asks me all the time, Mommy, why do I have to know this? Why am I learning this? And I always tell him, you don't need to know it. It's fine. Like, don't even worry about it. Like, I think school is a joke right now. And I put my children in because I have been told on a spirit level, part of their journey is to teach me what's going on in the school system, so I know what to change, and I can keep tabs on things and get ideas on what not to do. So I try to make it light for them. But these children, you know, there's so much competition, and the grading, all it's doing is lowering their self-confidence. You know, when you put children up against each other and with testing and all of these, what's it called, state testing and evaluation, it really stresses out the children. You know, the report cards are designed to really cause severe anxiety and stress, and the grade levels. I mean, everything in its system is designed to cause fear, stress, worry, because they need children to be in a constant state of low vibration so that they don't have that creative spark. They don't want that drive, you know, and that I'm trying to reverse that. I'm trying to create a self-driven environment where children are there because they want to learn. They decide what it is that they want to learn, and it's completely self-directed, organic, and holistic. And they're not going to be falling asleep. They're going to be begging their parents, I want to go to Aramis Centers, you know, because they're learning about things that are important. And then they're never going to ask, why am I learning this? Because they're going to understand, oh, I'm learning this because I need to learn how to, you know, where does the food come from? Children think that food comes from the grocery store. Oh, it comes, you know, from Safeway or Giant. Well, where does it come from there? Oh, a truck. Okay, so where does the truck get the food from? I don't know. You know, like that's a shame that our children have no idea where the food comes from, or they think it comes in a box that says brownie mix, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and sugar. You know, that's a big one that I learned, and it blew my mind when I learned this a couple of years ago. I had a child come to me with an urgent message. I believe, I can't remember because I talked to so many children, but I believe this was a girl. She was younger, and they had an urgent message from me. This was actually from her spirit guides, and they said sugar was brought to this earth for a nefarious purpose. They don't tell me where it came from. And I actually talked to Alex Collier at the conference, and I asked him, I said, do you know? And he said, gosh, I don't know either. But it was brought here because it's not originally grown on this planet. And they brought it here because they know that it's really disruptive for children to take. It's highly addictive. And we have studies. I mean, I don't even need to convince anybody. You can go and Google it, and you know, and the studies are out. It's not a conspiracy, but they do that on purpose to lower the vibration of children, cause fatigue, cause behavioral issues. And it messes with brain development, brain synapses. It causes aggression. I mean, and it's cheap. So it's an easy way for them to target the children.
You know, it's really interesting. This reminds me of a documentary I watched years ago on Netflix about a tribe in the Amazon that had zero contact with white man or any other humans for that matter. So, and then this group went over there and they started getting fired at, whatever. They finally got accepted into the village via this translator. And two things they did was introduced religion. Then the second thing is they literally brought cane sugar over on a stick, you know, like the candy cane sugar. So this tribe had never been introduced to sugar. They were eating the blandest food possible. It didn't have much flavor. They introduced sugar, and by the time they left, these people were fighting each other, literally almost to the death over that sugar. That's how addicting it was. And it was unbelievable to watch these grown adults act like children, like if you were to throw bread to birds, you know, just all fighting over that piece of bread. And I'm just like, wow, look at how off we are that we think that we know better than them to go and shove a Bible in their face and give them sugar. The two things that are going to, like, they're already fine without us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there are natural sugars, derivatives here, like honey and maple syrup and things like that, and dates, you know, there are ways to sweeten up your diet, but not cane sugar, you know, and people think they're buying this organic cane sugar at the store. And I'm like, nope, that's the same thing. Like, it's not. So they said, stop, you know, take this out of their diet, which is hard. How can you do that? How can any mother do that, or father or grandparent or caregiver right now? With any ease and without any kickback from their child. I mean, I didn't let my daughter have candy. She was very restricted on it. And her teacher sent me a note. Oh, she won't accept any candy during class as a reward, and it's making her feel really embarrassed. And I like that put me in a really awkward position, because I had to be like, you know what, it's okay, she can have it, because it was making her feel like an outcast, and I didn't want that for her. So I had to say, okay, do I let her be healthy, or do I let her have the piece of candy so she doesn't feel like an outcast? And it's really hard in this society to follow what is right, because they do everything they can. I mean, you can go to Staples or any store that has nothing to do with food, and the aisle right before the cashier, really low, is an array of candy. Why do they do that? It's not for the adults. It's for the children that come with their parents. And so they do that on purpose.
And none of it's real food. It's all the dyes and the sugars and the toxins. I noticed that even at home,
ultra processed,
even at the hardware store, Home Depot, like if you're checking out and you want a quick snack as a contractor or working on your home, you don't have a choice. Like if you're gonna get something there, you have pick your poison, literally. And it's like that in all major corporate department stores.
Yeah. If we may, I'd like to pivot back to the indigenous topic you just brought up, because that is another area that that has come up a lot in the sessions. So one of the things that they said to me, two things, one of which is the way that we treat our elderly has completely gone, negative. The elders carry the wisdom. We know that. And indigenous cultures, they have always regarded the elders, with all the wisdom, and they will purposely place the children with the elders so that we can see that. Like, how many of us say, well, how many of the older generation that have children now say, oh, my parents are so much more patient with my child than they were with me. And it's kind of like, hey, that's not fair. But they're older, they're wiser, they have a lot more life experience, and they have more to contribute. So this is designed for a reason, so that the elders can bring down the knowledge forward to the children, and they know that. So they do everything they can, one, to cause disease, 100%, if not mostly to 100% of disease that we have in our world. I don't want to say any particular diseases, but pick your poison. Is designed by the dark web, the dark matrix here. It's nefarious. It's purposely designed so that our elders disconnect in the latter of their years of their life, and they can't spend time with the young and pass the knowledge on. So they just say, oh, put them in these old people homes, we'll take care of them, and they abuse them, and then they just drop them off, and they never see them. The way we care for our elderly in this society is wrong. And there are a lot of pockets of the world that don't do that, but majority has taken that notion on, and that's designed in order to disconnect the elderly from passing on important knowledge to the children, but also the humanity in general. That's another thing that I found to be really important, that we're not talking about that stuff. We need to respect our elders and the wisdom that they carry.
Right. Well, if you go back to like Native American cultures and stuff, all these elders have hidden knowledge and star knowledge and all this stuff. Obviously, our grandparents have been programmed, and they're not going to retain that type of knowledge, but there is that wisdom and that life experience. I agree 100% with you there. But what has any information come through about like hidden knowledge from the elders, or star knowledge, I guess?
Certain information has come through during sessions that was pertinent to like that particular child and where they're from and their soul mission in this life. I'll have to think about it and write some stuff down, and maybe in part 2, or I'll go back through my hundreds of pages of notes. But there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of information that's blown my mind. But of course, I'm not going to be able to think of one offhand.
No, that's no problem. We can go. I wanted to ask you earlier about labels, how we label these children with ADHD and all that stuff. And I know information has come through about that, and I'm just interested to hear what your thoughts were.
I didn't seek out to talk about the labels, because I don't like to get into controversial topics and debates. Like, I'm not that type of a person. I don't like taking sides, and I don't like to upset a lot of people. So I kind of just try to remain neutral. But this kind of came to me. And I had almost the first ever autistic child that I worked with, a grandmother years ago, asked me to communicate with this particular child and what he wanted to say and why he wasn't talking. And he was only a 3 or 4, I think. I can't remember, so many years ago. But what he said to me is, and I talked about this at the conference, he said, I'm sorry, it wasn't about talking. It was looking at people in the eyes. Why won't he look at anybody? And he said, I don't want to look at anybody because I can see their demons and they scare me. And what he was basically, he went on more into it. And what he was saying is, he could see the energy body of the people. He could see the entourage of entities that are surrounding everybody, both good and bad. We have good entourage with angels and good spirits, but then people have the dark spirits that follow them. And the dark spirits tend to taunt the children because they know they can see them. So if a child is afraid of an adult, let's say in a grocery store, and the parents start to talking to this person and they hide behind mom or dad's leg and they're afraid, there's a reason for it. Maybe that person isn't necessarily a bad person, but the energy that they're around and what they're seeing is not good. And they're also human lie detectors. So this child said, I can see them. And they see more than what's in front. They can read their energy. They can tell if they're lying, and they know so much. You can't lie to children these days. I mean, they will call you out on it. They know when you're not being truthful. Because they can read energy. They're a master at reading energy, and they can see the demonic spirits that are around some of these dark people, and they don't want to see it. And they also, it becomes overwhelming. Imagine a child that meets an adult and all of this information comes that they don't want to know. They don't understand what it means, but they're seeing it all, and it's overwhelming and intimidating. So they hide behind mom or dad because they feel safe. And when mom and dad force them in situations where they're like, oh no, give this person a hug, give uncle blah 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 a hug you haven't seen in 3 years, and they're like, I don't want to. This is teaching the children that they should go against their gut. Their intuition is telling them, I don't feel comfortable in this situation, but mom and dad are telling me, no, you do it anyways. What do you think that conflict is doing to the child? It's teaching them, I don't listen to myself. I listen to somebody else. Someone else tells me what to do, and I listen to it. And then they go through their life doing things that they don't want to do because they don't trust their knowing and their intuition. So that was quite profound when this child told me about that. And that led to many other things. So many sessions after that, I started understanding those labeled ADHD and autistic children and Asperger's had a lot more going on energetically. And I was like, this is fascinating. Why don't people know this? And I don't mean that from an ego way, like I was discovering something new, but it was new to me and I hadn't heard anybody talk about it. And what I learned is, let's take ADHD, for example. It just means you're hyperactive, right? You don't want to sit still. Well, these children, the higher your frequency and the higher vibration that you give out, the more energy and more light is in your body, right? You can't sit still. A lot of these children, there's so much energy bouncing in and out of them that they can't sit still. There's so much movement. So they fidget, they move around. They're not going to walk normal. They're normal in our society terms. Nothing is normal. They can't sit still for 6 hours in schooling and listen to a teacher lecture. They can't sit still. And then they're yelled at for not being able to pay attention. They have so much going on. The brain is firing these synapses. They're so multidimensional. They're thinking 100 different things at the same time. That's why they're so bored in school, because the teacher is monotonously saying the same thing in the same tone. And they're like, oh my God, okay, can we get to something else? They actually do better with more things happening at the same time. And so they're labeled hyperactive, and as if that's a bad thing, when in reality, they're really wise. They're really active in their energy, and they need to be able to be provided the opportunity to move around, and swing on the chair, swing in one of those swings in the classroom, or sit in a bouncy chair, whatever they need to do so that they feel like they need to get that energy out. When we have an energetic buildup in the body, we have to get it out somehow. We can do it through tears, through sweat, by exercising, through breath. There's lots of different ways.
Right.
And some of which with children, they don't know how to articulate it, or they don't know how to control it. So that they have behavioral issues from screaming or hitting, because they have to get it out somehow. And if they're made to sit in the chair for a long period of time, they literally will be like exploding with energy. And then they act out and they hit, or they kick, or they do something to the kid next to them. And now suddenly, Billy's in the office because he's in trouble again. And then they medicate them. And all that's doing is placing them back in the box, the little pretty box that everybody in society needs to make sure they're in. And if they're not in it, you're bad. So we got to put you back in somehow and make you behave, little girls and little boys, and they medicate you. But what that does is it disconnects the life force energy, and they become numb and a shell of themselves, and they're walking zombies. And parents tell me that all the time, that I need to get my child off of these meds because he's not here. She's not here anymore. So the energetic perspective of ADHD is much more than what they're being labeled for. It's actually a beautiful thing. When you take Asperger's, they're very left brain individuals. They're highly intelligent, and their life purpose is to come through and bring knowledge. They're the innovators, the inventors, the architects of the new world. They have a purpose, a really important purpose. They don't want to mess around. They come here for it. They have a job to do. So they're like, we got to get to work. They're very analytical. They're very logical. They're very intelligent, But the issue in a human form is that they lack a little bit of empathy. Not in a way that it's bad, but they're just like, they can't relate to human behavior so much because many of them haven't been human before, or not many times. So they're just trying to figure out how to navigate being a human. And in their mind, all they want to do, they want to be an adult so they can get to work, which remind me about walk-ins. And we can talk about that before we finish today. So Asperger's are just highly intelligent children that happen to not want to be children. So they don't want to play with toys. They don't do well with other children their age. They tend to want to play with older children because they're a very wise, high conscious being in a little body. And they don't like that. So there's an energetic explanation for everything. Dyslexia is just a fancy word for saying they don't learn the way that we learn, but there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe they're not used to reading because where they come from, they download, they communicate through telepathy and other ways. It's instant downloading. So coming here to the earth, by the way, when you're a multidimensional high density being, reading a book is like, oh my God, it's torture for them. Like, what do you mean? And read this book? Where I come from, it's just there. I want to know it. I tap into the collective consciousness. Boom, I got it. And so they hate to read. Why do I have to write? Like, what's writing about? Like, I don't want to write this down. So it's not that they come across as arrogant, but they're just being their authentic self, and they're not apologizing for it. So when you start to understand more about their characteristics, you get it. You're like, okay, I understand why you're being labeled that way, but we got to get rid of the labels because there's absolutely nothing wrong with them when you look at it from that perspective. But when you're trying to categorize them into the human box that they want us to be in, well, of course they don't fit in. And yeah, there is something wrong if you're looking at it from the other perspective. And that's where we are right now. And part of my mission is to get rid of those labels altogether. Right.
This also brings me to the point of free will. So, apparently this is a free will planet, where there's people that say we have the illusion of free will, which I've heard Max Spears describe it as, he said, the controllers have free will. The sheeple do not have free will. That's an illusion. And basically everything you just described shows exactly why humans don't have free will, because you're not given a choice, and even when you're an adult, like, it's still an illusion. Do we really have free will? No, we still have to pay taxes and pay our bills. Can you get into that a little bit? Because I know you've touched on that before.
I would real quick, I would say we absolutely do have free will. It's that we are manipulated into giving up our free will to the system and to these negative things, because we live in this negative matrix slave plantation, that everything we're taught is the opposite of what it should be, and that what would actually serve us. It's like, so we're always manipulated to willingly do things against our own best interests, and that hurts us and our kids and everything else.
Right, but
free will,
in a sense, that's the concept, and it's like a theory. Like, the theory is that we should all be on a free will planet, but because we're in the system, we don't have the free will. But yeah, it's a free will planet, but we're manipulated away from that, and it becomes an illusion of free will. And you can add to that.
It's, you're both right. You're both right. And this is the problem with human language, which is another reason why children don't speak, the ones that don't. They know that the words that we speak are spells, that they emit frequencies, they shift our energy, and they don't want to say the words because we're just arguing about what right now. Not that you're arguing, but the point is, the way we say things and our beliefs are extremely dictated by this matrix that we're in the programming. But when you get into free will, I mean, everybody talks about free will. Anybody you watch on any spiritual or truther channel, they're going to say, "Oh, we have free will." And I think, I'm calling BS on that. And I learned that through the children. They're like, "This isn't free will. You're told that you have free will, that this is a free will planet." But at the end of the day, it's free will in a environment that's controlled. So think about it with parents. When I do parenting, when I help parents navigate through what I call spirited children that can be difficult, I say, give them choices. So, they can have A or B, but they feel like they are empowered and they have a voice, but you're giving them the parameters that you are comfortable with so that they can choose from, right? So that's making it very simple. But when you take free will on a larger scale with humanity, I believe the same thing is being done to us with what I call the powers that are no longer in control. But the way this matrix was designed, that we're manipulating and we're controlling humanity, they have designed a network of the control parameters, so that we feel as though we have a voice and we have free will, but we have no willpower. We don't have any power, because it's designed within, okay, you can choose from these things. And anybody that decides to go outside of that is a conspiracy theorist, or they're wonky, or they're bipolar, or they're schizophrenic,
shunned,
they're taken out. All these things, they do everything that they can to make them look like a quack or a bad person. And that's how it's been for a long time. And I feel for those people that really tried to speak out, and they were just they just lost the battle. But that's where we are. It's not free will. It's not true free will. But what the children are telling me, it hasn't been, but what they're telling me is that is changing, and they're coming in, and that's why they have an attitude. That's why they don't listen. That's why they're argumentative, and they're stubborn, and they're strong-willed, because they are not going to accept the parameters of this free will. This convoluted free will is what I like to call it. They're like, nope, we're breaking all the paradigms down, and then now we rebuild it with true free will.
Right. Amen. Yes.
Right.
It's exactly what needs to happen.
Yes.
And you see it happen. I mean, you just said, these children, they're not the same as I was. Like, kids are doing things nowadays that I wasn't even thinking about at a young age. They're coming in with like that remembrance. They don't have all the amnesia, I don't think, like we had. It's really interesting. It's like a true starseed, and they remember even galactic heritage and knowledge and all that stuff. So I want to go back to, you were talking about children being able to see the demons, and the demons taunt them because they can see them. Now, this leads into nightmares and psychic attacks and things that happen. And I know this is a big issue, because I know parents who struggle with parenting because their children are being attacked or waking up sharing these horrific stories of what's happening to them. What has any information come through surrounding that?
This is probably the biggest topic that comes up with, I would say, 75% of my sessions. It comes up almost every single time. This is a real thing. It's our children are attacked the most at night when they're sleeping, because we are the most vulnerable when we are sleeping, because we, many of us, if not all, astrally travel on some level. And so we are more vulnerable to psychic attack and these demonic entities and these bad spirits coming and taunting the children. I talk about the movie Nightmare on Elm Street. That was popular when I was young. That's a real thing. Like, not exactly how they presented it, but the notion of being attacked and tormented in your dreams is a real thing. It happens. And I never experienced it. I experienced that as a child, but I never experienced it with my two boys until my daughter came. And around 2 years old, she just screamed bloody murder in the middle of the night. And she was like uncontrollable. Like, I couldn't calm her down. It was like she saw like the most terrifying thing, and she couldn't articulate it at the time. But from that night on, she would not sleep in her room by herself. And she's now 8, and she just started sleeping in her room when we moved into this house just a few months ago. So this was a really real thing. And she's tormented and they will literally wake you up. They will come into your room. They will attack you in your dreams. And many parents that I talk to, their children will describe these beings in the exact same way. So how is it that a child in the United States can see the same thing in Canada is seeing, and a child in Australia and a child in Italy. They're all seeing the exact same red-eyed monsters, and there's a lot of different categories that I've kind of noticed. But how is that possible? They don't talk to each other. They don't know each other. I haven't seen these things in children's cartoons. So it's a very real thing. And one woman was fed up and said, I've been sleeping with my child for almost a year now. My husband's getting upset. I don't know what to do. Is my child playing me, or is he really being attacked at night? And like he says, and is he really scared, or is he just being taking advantage of me? And I knew he wasn't, but I didn't. I was like, well, let me see what they have to say. And he said, and he was being attacked. He saw the red-eyed monsters, and he said to me, what he said was, animals sleep in packs. Why don't you? Because I said, well, why don't you sleep by yourself? And he said, well, animals sleep in packs. Why don't you? Nature, they know it innately how to remain safe. And you're not going to see a pack of wolves sleeping in separate areas of the woods. They're going to sleep together in a way that they feel connected and safe, so that if something comes around to try to attack them, they're all together and safe. And in many indigenous cultures, they do the same thing. The families all sleep in one main room, or the mom sleeps with the children. There's different variations to it, but they do that by design, because we're not supposed to be separated in different quarters. Like we have all these different bedrooms and everyone is separated, especially the infants. The infants in their own little nursery, when they started doing that, like that was clearly an infiltration from the dark side to put that information out to the public, like this is normal. It was in all the movies, all the TV shows. Suddenly the child was outside of the parents' room and in a nursery, and so it's a way for the children to be in a situation where they're vulnerable. And unfortunately, most children, I think, are they're not taken serious by their parents, and they tell them, oh, just go back to bed, and they're scared and they cry. Many children tell me they cry themselves to sleep every night, and they're afraid, and they are genuinely attacked. And I slept with my daughter for years because she would be beside herself, screaming and crying and shaking. I knew she wasn't lying. She was being attacked every single night. And so it's a real thing. There's something called SIDS. I don't want to say the words because I don't want to get you flagged, but that is a real thing that occurred in the 80s and 90s, because the dark ones would come in and disconnect the life force from the children, because they were light workers. They came to the planet to do something important, and they got rid of them. Nobody had an explanation, and these things did contribute to that, but they were literally disconnected. The life force energy was sucked out of them, and they passed away from that. So that's another thing that they taught me. I had no idea until they started telling me about that.
Yeah, it's very real, especially the attacks and children seeing things. I mean, I know that even as an adult who gets attacked, or used to a lot. I know, listening to other testimonies and other stories, people describe the same exact shit. I'm like, there's no way you can make this up anymore. But my little brother, he used to be scared of what he would call the white Santa Claus. And he was afraid to go to sleep, and he would always be afraid of this thing. Well, the neighbor, a couple houses down, their son, one day they came over and they were telling, oh yeah, Mike can't sleep. He keeps seeing this white man and this gray beard. And they're like, no way. So like, it's the same entity attacking all the children on the same street. And they're not, the kids weren't talking about it to each other. It's a real thing.
It really is. So the best advice I can give the parents that are in a situation where their children are suffering from nightmares, and they're feeling like, should I let them sleep with me? Of course it's a personal choice, but I'm going to tell you that your child is not making it up, and it is very real. How you handle it is up to you. But if you can so when I stopped sleeping with Aramis, I did that because, I do have a husband, and at one point he said, I need to sleep with my wife. And I had to, think about that. 2 years is a long time. And so what I did is I put Aramis with one of her brothers, and they slept together for years, and she felt safe with him. And so, I know people who don't have multiple siblings, that may not be an option, but if sometimes people will let the dog sleep with the child in the room, like there are other things that you can do. But the point is to listen to them, because if they don't feel like they can trust you, and you don't believe them, what else are they going to feel like they can't trust you? And what else are they going to feel like they can't tell you because they won't be believed, and it's really important.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I've heard this. A lot of parents say this. Oh, it's just a dream. It's just a dream. Like the kids aren't taught to, it's funny because as an adult, they're like, oh, get a dream journal, write it down. But when they're a child, they're like, oh, it's just a dream, go back to sleep. If they were taught to start learning from their dreams at an early age, it would be a lot different. Things would be a lot different. And the parents won't be so quick to dismiss these negative attacks that they don't understand. And that's not the parents' fault, because like I know somebody who's dealing with, they don't know what to do. And it scares them also. And it's really interesting, the information about sleeping in a pack. That to me is something I never thought about before. It's true. Every animal on the planet does that, and not every animal, but for
not everyone, but most of them.
For the most part, like, it's a unit, and obviously that's for survival purposes. It's really no different.
Yeah.
Wow. We've been covering a lot. So, I do have a question about when you're talking to these children and you start mentioning, you getting into like galactic information, like past life information, or maybe you were from Orion or something. Like, how do the kids receive that information? Or, I mean, most of the time they're open to it, but I know some children I talk to, if I ask them they believe in aliens, like, oh no, that's not real, So I just wonder what that looks like from child to child.
That's a really good question. For some reason, I think, well, not for some reason, nothing's by accident, but I tend to attract the families with the children that want to know and are interested. So I would say 95% of the sessions that I've done with hundreds of children, they were excited to know, they were open to it, and very curious. Some of the younger ones, obviously they're too young. Like some of them have been infants. Some of them have been, less than a year old or 2 years old and aren't really ready to understand that intellectually on a child's level. So it was more for the parent. But majority of the time, it resonates with the children and they get really excited to know because they want to know where they're from. And I always tell them, everybody's from the same place. We're all from the light. We're all light. We don't actually originate from one particular planet. That's not real. But what happens is your soul has had many lifetimes in this particular place, and that's home to you. Does this resonate with you? And it could be Orion, it can be Andromeda, it can be Arcturus, wherever. I've communicated with lots of different children, but there seems to be, if I had to come up with like an average, a lot of children are coming from Alpha Centauri in the last couple of years, and that seems, I have a lot from there. Why that is, I've been told that that it's not necessarily the children that are from there, but there seems to be some sort of hub there where volunteers from different places come there to learn about being a human being, because many, many, many children that are coming in right now, or souls that are coming through as children, have never been human before, maybe not have ever even been on Earth. So they have to train. And I talked to one child that was training for 150 human years, to our years. To them, it was much faster, but it would be equivalent to 150 of our years to train to be a human being. That's why there's a lot of children out there that are society say, oh, they're awkward. They talk funny. They look different. They act different. They walk different. They're weird. And that's because they're trying to figure out how to fit in. They're trying to feel like many of them have had a light form. So they're not used to the body. They feel it's very heavy. It's very dense. It's mushy. It's smelly. They've told me. They don't like our food. They're not used to eating. Most of these children say, I can't even imagine eating meat. We don't eat meat where I come from. We don't eat this much food. They don't want to eat as much. There's so many different things that they're trying to kind of blend in with our environment. Some of them are doing really well, and some really struggle with it. And they feel like outcasts. They know they're not from here, and they know they're different. And I think those are the parents that see me and they're like, oh my God, that's my son, that's my daughter. And when I talk to them, they light up because they're like, finally somebody gets me. Finally someone understands me, and it breaks my heart sometimes, but it's also a good thing because they finally connect with somebody. But I believe it's changing, and they came in here with a big purpose, and we are going to shift very soon. And we have gradually been shifting for the last probably 10 to 15 years, but more condensed in the last 3 to prepare ourselves, because I believe 2023 is the year of great shift. Like a lot will happen next year, and we're going to see a lot of change.
A lot is happening too. It's just hard to notice whenever everything's so chaotic, but it's happening gradually. You can't, if you know where to look, you see it. And I think it's very apparent sometimes. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. But I do want to go into walk-ins. You mentioned this would lead perfectly into walk-ins. Yeah. And this is something I'm actually curious about because I don't fully understand. I understand the concept of the walk-in, but I don't know what kind of information you have.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, traditional, if there is such a word, meaning for walk-ins, it has been in the past for a couple of reasons. But generally, it's the soul of the person that really is struggling and wants to leave, and it cannot, like, literally, it's petitioning to God, their soul group. I can't be in this body. I will commit suicide. I will do this. I can't be here. And if that person's role in humanity is extremely important, like if they were to leave, it would really cause a negative ripple effect for many lives, and it would mess up the trajectory of all these people. They can't. So what they'll do is a walk-in will come in and agree to take over that person's life. Many walk-ins don't know they're walk-ins previously, but I think in the last probably 50 years or so, the walk-ins know. They're like, oh, I know I'm a walk-in. And there are many talking about their stories all over the internet, and they have books. So what the children have been telling me is that there are a lot of children walk-ins right now for a different reason, because a lot of these children are not used to being human, or maybe they've been human before, but they are much more evolved because they've been someplace else. They're coming back. They know what it's like to be a child. I wouldn't say nobody. You can't ever say anything 100% with certainty, but majority of people don't like to be a child. It's really hard, especially when you're so wise, to listen and be in a child's body, in that consciousness and this reality, and listening to everybody when you know it, when you're like, oh, stop telling me what to do. And, they want to be so much older than they are because they know innately that they are just so much more than the age that they're in. And they really struggle. And then there are those that are coming in for the first time, and they're like, human babies and toddlers are like too primal for me. I can't even deal with it. I don't want to do it. Literally, they've told me. So what they do is they have an insert. So it's their life the whole time, but from the time that the child is born, there is an insert, a walk-in first that agrees to be a child for them. And these are generally angelic beings or souls that are very used to being a human, and they're okay, and they can adapt, and they'll be like, okay, I could easily take your place. And they will come in up until a certain amount of years, whatever they've decided. It could be 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7. And then at that point in which the soul has decided, okay, I can come in, then that soul that has been in that body will leave. And then the real person, that's a soul that's supposed to be in this life, that has the long-term journey, will come in. And it's pretty evident to the parents. They know that because they have a marked personality change. Suddenly they're really calm. Before they were not, or they have an extreme aversion to certain foods, whereas they didn't before. And they generally do walk-ins, usually come in through some sort of minor surgery. So a lot of children that get tonsillectomies or some sort of quick medical procedure that's not too invasive, they'll use that opportunity to switch. That's very common. Or if there's some sort of injury that is puts them out a little bit, then they'll come in that way as well. So there are a lot more walk-ins than we've ever seen before, but it's their choosing, because they don't want to be a child. They want to kind of come in where they feel like they can get their bearings and then proceed forward and not have to be too primal, because it's really hard to do that.
Right. That's I've heard that similar concept with Secret Space Program. I know this is shifting it off a little bit, but I've heard the concept of somebody basically their soul incarnating, let's say, even on a ship or another planet or whatever. And then they come down here. They're born as a human to see how that soul is going to take to the human body. They come already knowing they're going to go back into the program, but they have to see how that soul is going to take to the human body. And then like at a certain age, that's when they come and actually they do a walk-in or some type of swap, and the 20 and back happens or whatever. But it's an interesting concept. It's not the same as a walk-in, but it just makes you wonder about like we sign up for this stuff before we ever get here.
Absolutely. I that's what I believe. Now, am I right? I think so, but who knows? You know, we only know what our consciousness and our perception of our vibration at that time, you know, and it can change later, and our beliefs can change, and that's fine because we're always evolving. But another important point with the walk-ins is that because these children are really high density and their vibration is so high, our human bodies up until probably 2000 to 2005 couldn't hold the energy. Like our bodies like literally short circuit, and it's almost like these souls are allergic. I've actually been told that this one child used this term, I'm allergic to the environment here. It's too dense. And so their physical bodies can't withstand all the energy, and they have to integrate. So they either come in partially, which is similar to disassociation, but by design. Like parts of them come in, fractals of them come in a little bit at a time to get the body used to it. Otherwise, they would have illness, not because of nefarious purposes, but because the body short circuits. It's too much. They'd have neurological issues and many other issues because the body can't withstand that much energy within it. So that's why many women who have starseed children have miscarriages or have trouble getting pregnant, because there's too much energy in the womb. So their body has to have what do I call it? Like an energetic pregnancy first, where the energy of the mom and the baby integrate first outside the body and slowly integrate until the conception takes place. And then over the period of gestation, more and more energy comes through. There are so many ways we can take this conversation, and there's so many layers to it. But it just blows your mind. Like you think you know, but we have no idea.
It reminds me of Laura Van Tine. I'm not sure if you're aware of her, but she got information through a session one time that said a baby can live up to 2 weeks, or they can be born and live up to 2 weeks without having a soul. And this is because sometimes the mother or the parents, or the mother would be a drug addict or whatever the case is. They don't match the frequency of their mother, and they literally that soul can't be in there at that same time. That's why a child will be born and sometimes they look lifeless for a couple days or whatever it is, up to 2 weeks. I don't know if that's true, but when she said that, it really got me thinking, because it's true. Sometimes you see the little baby that doesn't look like anyone's home yet.
And I 100% agree with her. I don't know about up to 2 weeks. I've never really asked how long, but I have seen that. And I do believe that happens for many reasons, like you just mentioned. But sometimes it's that the child is being called here. The soul is being called here, but they're not quite ready to come through yet. There's something else going on where they're finishing up. And so they have just enough life energy to keep the body alive. But you could tell like something, they're not home, you know, and then they enter when it's time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's pretty apparent. I think that is the case, which also going back to the birthing, the whole umbilical cord thing too. I've heard that the longer you leave that attached, they're still getting, like, for one, nutrients, but two, that's when they're truly connected to source or through that portal, and they're getting downloads still. They're still getting information. And I don't know if you had any information come through on that.
It's 100% true. A lot of the indigenous cultures keep the umbilical cord connected until it falls off. Then they wrap it up and put herbs and put it in a basket. And it takes about 5 to 7 days for the umbilical cord to dry up. So even if you cut it in the hospital, like we do here in the States and many places, they still have a good part of it, that wilts in and curls up, and then it falls off 5 to 7 days later. So most cultures, what they do is they leave it attached because they are getting important nutrients, and their life force is still connected to that, because it's all, once the blood stops pumping, there's still an energy flow, and they understand that. But here they're abruptly cut. I mean, I was a hypnobirthing practitioner for years, so I taught women how to have a more natural birth using self-hypnosis, relaxation techniques, and breathing. So you don't need to have medication, and you can bring your baby in a more empowering, comfortable way for the mom and the child, so that the birthing experience is positive, and less traumatic for the baby, because I believe that's important. And what we learned is that they purposely cut that cord right as soon as the baby comes out. I mean, they did it with all three of mine before I knew better, and they cut it immediately. And there's still blood pumping through that thing. Like, that's valuable blood that they're losing, and nutrients. And then on top of that, they bag it up, and well, we know what they do with it. We won't get into that right now, but really, we should be banking that. If we decide to cut it, we should be banking those stem cells, because those are valuable to the child if they need them later, if they become ill. Everything that we're doing in this society is completely ass backwards. It's designed that way on purpose, though, right? Because they don't want us to know how powerful we are. And another big thing that the children are telling me is we have to get this savior complex, like, out of our consciousness. Like, where did we go wrong with that? And even to this day, I still listen to podcasts, and certain people talk about, we're going to be saved by this. I don't want to use any names, because I like to remain neutral. I don't take sides. People see me affiliate with certain people, and they're like, oh, well, you're on that team now, and now you believe.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're on that there and that channel, and I'm just like, I don't even answer that, because I'm an individual. I'm a sovereign, liberated being, and I don't take sides. I don't believe anyone's coming to save us. I think the purpose of this ascension is for us to use discernment. And a lot of these are psyops. A lot of these take this side or that side is a complete farce. It's a psyop. Again, it's testing our will. What is our willpower? Are we going to succumb to taking this side and believing this person or this team versus the other? You're losing your power. People don't even realize it, and it's happening to them every single day. Just because you stop watching CNN doesn't mean that you're evolving if you're now giving your power away to somebody else. Right. And waiting for this false savior. This is the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that the children teach me. We have to find our true north ourselves. The more strong we are in ourself and centered and balanced, we have more life force energy coming through the body, we will know, literally, we will know everything we need to know. We will see through all the lies. We will see through all the illusions, and we won't need a savior. We will recognize that we are our own savior. And if we all work together, we all have compassion and kindness for one another. We all evolve as a group in a loving, cohesive environment of oneness and unity. Who cares about these supposed saviors? We don't need them. And, it baffles my mind when I see people arguing about the same thing and what side you're on. They're not learning anything, and they're not evolving. I'm sorry, this is getting ridiculous. And the children are trying to teach us that.
Yes, that was beautifully said. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. And when you really think about the whole savior thing, and we understand how everything is a program, why isn't that a program also? To be programmed to expect the savior, because it stops you from doing everything that you just described, and going on that path of self-discovery. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up on that note. I'll give you a chance to let people know how they can find you, and you can talk a little bit more about the Creative Learning Center if you want, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Yeah, perfect. So AramisCreativeLearningCenter.com is the website for the Learning Center for Children. You can contact me through there, so I'll make it real simple for everybody. We do have a nonprofit that we started called the Aramis Collective. So it's the AramisCollective.com. And we do accept donations. Everything that I'm trying to create is supposed to be free education for children, but we need the community support right now so that we can get the platform up and running. So, any donations is so much appreciated. We have a cartoon animation series for children that I created about a year and a half ago. We have 14 episodes. We're working on the 15th right now, where children can learn a variety of topics like we've talked about today, but in a way that's, fun for them, and they see it with other children learning at the same time. We have almost 7 books out that are modeled off of the animation. So donations help us keep those going.
what else was I going to say? Yeah, I guess that's everything. If you want to contact me, you can contact me through Aramis Creative Learning Center website.
Yes, and we're looking forward to the first location in Florida. It'll happen.
Yes.
I know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And a great place for it too. Well, this was incredible. There's stuff I know I could have gotten into, but it takes it in a completely different direction. And for the sake of time, we'll definitely have to do a part 2 and have you back on. But we look forward to having you join us at the conference, which, guys, don't forget, tickets go on sale tomorrow. All that will be posted on social media. We'll probably make a post on YouTube about it. So stay tuned for that. But Sherri will be there, and we're looking forward to that. Really looking forward to that. It's going to be fun. Any last words, Aaron, Sherri?
No, I'm excited to go to the conference. Thank you for inviting me. I can't wait to see you guys in person, and all the other guests that you've invited. And yeah, I look forward to it. So thank you for having me today on your show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, thank you. We love you all. We appreciate your support. We can't do it without you. Have a great evening, and we will see you next time.